The High Seas Treaty, which is also known as the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement, has been signed successfully by 60 nations in the entire world. Now, this represents a remarkable effort in ensuring global maritime security. And this is a remarkable feat which has been achieved by 60 different nations across the world. Now, ratified by around 60 powerful countries across the world, the treaty will enter into force by January of 2026. The major aim of this treaty is to protect maritime biodiversity, also which is beyond any national jurisdiction, so-called the high seas. So area which is known as high seas, which is beyond any national jurisdiction of any country, to protect biodiversity in those areas, this treaty would be very, very essential. Alongside this treaty is also going to promote sustainable usage of ocean resources, as well as addressing the threats or addressing the problems like overfishing, addressing the problem of pollution, climate change, and also ensuring equitable benefit sharing of maritime genetic resources. Now, ensuring all these things, this High Sea Treaty is very, very prominent, very important and landmark in ensuring global maritime conservation. Now, this treaty is under UN Clause 1982, that is United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Now, what this treaty is all about, what are key features of the treaty, and what are some challenges which this treaty might face in future, all these things we'll be trying to understand in this particular session. Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh, and you are watching Perspective. Now, let us understand from the very basics that what is this High Seas Treaty. Now, first of all, the term high seas simply means the water which is not under the jurisdiction of any national government, which means the water which is international. Now, in this case, we call it as high seas water. Now, this water is also having a lot of marine biodiversity. There are a lot of marine ecosystems. There are a lot of aquatic ecosystems. Alongside that, there are a lot of resources available, a lot of genetic material available. A lot of plants, animals, microorganisms, a number of things are available in these ecospots. Now, it's whose responsibility to ensure its conservation, and it's whose responsibility to ensure that the biodiversity and ecosystem is maintained, that we do not know. Which is why, because this water comes in high seas, because this water is international water, no separate country is having a jurisdiction over that water, 60 countries came together and formed a treaty. Formed an alliance, and this treaty is what we call as High Seas Treaty, or formally, if you want to know, it is known as Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement. So simply, what will be done under this treaty? An international framework would be laid down as to how this ecosystem hotspots or these maritime biodiversity would be conserved by the countries at large together. Which means the area which is beyond the national control of the country. How will that area be conserved, be protected, and be further developed? This treaty will tell us. Also, one more important thing is that this water which you're talking about under this treaty, it's around 2/3 of the oceanic water, or two-thirds of the global ocean surface, which means this area is humongous, and it is very important and crucial for climate regulation, very crucial for carbon sequestration, and very important for ensuring global food security as well, which is why a lot of tools and mechanisms are included in this treaty in order to ensure sustainable governance of the treaty. The first of the tools and mechanisms includes marine genetic resources, that is MGR. Now, these marine genetic resources, these are actually recognized as common heritage of humankind. Now, marine genetic resources simply include the genetic material which is derived from marine plants or marine animals or marine microorganisms that can be used either for scientific purposes or commercial gains as well. Now, this might include the application of pharmaceuticals and biotechnology, whereby this marine genetic resources are definitely used. So that is one part. Another part of the tools is area-based management tools. We call it as ABTs. Now, this particular treaty, it allows for creation of marine protected areas. MPAs. For example, we have protected areas in the land, like national park, like wildlife sanctuaries. In similar way, there is a significance of marine protected areas, and it is put forward that a marine protected area should be there in these particular high seas. And what is the reason why a marine protected area should be there? Definitely for conservation of that particular biodiversity hotspot, and also to ensure that the critical ecosystem is safe, secure, and prosperous. Now, one more thing is that there is a very important task of identifying these regions as well. right? That's a very tedious task as well. So these zones will be identified using a mix of scientific data and traditional knowledge as well. So a mix of both the things. On the basis of that, these regions would be recognized and would be identified. And other than that, last but not the least, one of the most important methods will be used. We call it as environmental impact assessment. Yes, you must have heard it somewhere as well. Environmental impact assessment is a very prominent topic under the UPSC Civil Services examination as well. Now, this is a kind of an activity which is likely to assess the impact of any activity, any industry, or any project on the marine ecosystem, especially on the marine ecosystem. So environmental impact assessment is also done here, which is why any activity having a cumulative and transboundary impact must go through a mandatory environmental impact assessment that is given. And this definitely ensures that preventive measures are taken before any potential damage is done. Also, last but not the least tool involves capacity building and technology transfer. Now, since we all know that this is a global treaty, and the technological difference between country to country is very wide, is very huge, which is why this treaty also promotes technology transfer between one country and another, and also transfer of oceanic research and governance related information from one country to another, so that there can be a equal participation which can be reached. Which is why capacity building of nations which are not sophisticated in research and technology is definitely the key here. Now, since we have understood about the treaty, High Seas Treaty, we have understood about the significant features and important inputs and the tools which will be used in the treaty as well. So we overall have a fair bit of idea about the treaty. Let us trace back in time and let us try to understand what was the evolution of this treaty and how this treaty got evolved. Now, simply speaking, it took around 2 decades, that is 20 years of time, for this treaty to develop, which means it has been in discussion, in talk since the last 2 decades. And it was back then in the year 2004 when the UN General Assembly established an ad hoc working group to address the gap in UN clause. Why? What was the reason? Because this UN clause, it lacked specific provisions on biodiversity beyond any national jurisdiction. So the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, what should we do for them? For that, an ad hoc committee was put forward by UN General Assembly in the year 2004. Now, from 2004 to 2011, many of the countries agreed to have a discussion and to have a negotiation on 4 key areas, which includes MGRs, which includes ABMTs, which includes environmental impact assessment EIAs, and also capacity building as well. Now, from 2018 to the year 2023, 4 intergovernmental conferences took place. Now, after 4 intergovernmental conferences, the culmination was signing an agreement in March 2023. The culmination was an agreement of March of 2023. And eventually, this treaty was formally adopted in the June of 2023, setting the stage for a new era of cooperative ocean governance. Now, like it happens with all the international treaties in the world, similarly, this treaty is also not devoid of any criticism or also not devoid of any challenges. And which is why let us look at some of the key challenges now. See, one challenge would be the ambiguity or the tussle or the crossroads between 2 things. One is common heritage and second is freedom of the seas. Now, both the things are a bit contradictory to each other, because common heritage of humankind, it advocates for equitable sharing of oceanic resources amongst all the nations. That is what common heritage means. But freedom of the high seas, it simply reflects, it guarantees the states unrestricted access to navigation, unrestricted access to research and exploitation rights as well. Right? So somewhere there might be a clash between the two, which will hamper the working of this treaty. That is one set of criticism. Another is the governance of marine genetic resources. Now, before the treaty, there were no definitely global norms on the extraction and commercialization of MGRs, and this also led to certain concerns known as biopiracy. Now, this simply means where developed nations and private entities, they could exploit the resources of the ocean without compensating the developing countries for the same. That is biopiracy. So these issues were already there. Although this treaty mandates that there would be a sharing between monetary and non-monetary benefits, but it lacks clarity in its calculation that what will be the calculation of the sharing and what will be the mechanism for calculation and distributing of these benefits. That is not clearly mentioned in the treaty. And the biggest criticism drawn is that despite global support, the global powers, the major powers, are not present here, and there is limited presentation, or there is limited participation of the global powers in this treaty, whether it be US, whether it be China, whether it be Russia. These important, significant powers are not a part of it. So this non-participation of these countries, it undermines the value of this treaty, it undermines the treaty's universality, and also weakens its enforcement capacity to a very great extent. See, but then the question is, what should be done? The answer is not a very simple one. What we need to do is that this treaty must align with the existing institutions which are existing. For example, International Seabed Authority and the regional fisheries management organizations. This treaty should align with these institutions in order to prevent any jurisdictional overlap. Now, while this is being done, there should be coherent coordination between all these organizations amongst themselves. Alongside that, internally the framework should be made in a very robust way. All the rules and regulations, all the prescriptions, all the nitty-gritties should be finalized in a very detailed way, so there should be very less scope of any ambiguity to arise, which is why everything should be crystal clear, should be laid down, should be agreed by all, and there should be a consensus-led approach. And the already existing countries should try for going for universal ratification by also diplomatically making other nations like US, China, all these countries agree to make them agree for joining this particular treaty. So operation-wise, institution-wise, framework-wise, and plus expansion-wise, on these four fronts, this treaty needs to work. And if the work is done, definitely this high seas treaty would be a success, and the maritime biodiversity, which is beyond any national jurisdiction, it would get a lot of conservation, it would get a lot of protection, plus it would get a lot of further development in future. I hope you gained a new perspective from this session. You understood about the high seas treaty. All the very best. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.